So good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today to discuss what we can do to support student mental health. My name is Nina, and I will be hosting this webinar today. We should be taking about 45 minutes of your time today, and that will include an opportunity to ask questions from our speakers at the end. So I'd just like to do a couple of introductions before we start the webinar. So today we are joined by Dr. Dominique Thompson and Naomi Wilkinson, and I'll just let them introduce themselves quickly. We'll start with Dominique on the left.
Hello, some of you will know me, but for those of you who don't, good morning as well, and I'll be telling you a bit more about me in just a second.
And hi, I'm Naomi. I'm a commissioning editor at Epigeum, and I'll be talking you through our new toolkit, Being Well, Living Well.
Thank you both. So that's just me on the right, and I work in the Epigeum marketing team, and I'll be hosting this webinar. So just before we start, here's our agenda for today. So first we will hear from Dominique, who will present on the current state of student mental health around the world. And then Naomi will introduce our newest project, which will be an interactive online toolkit called Being Well, Living Well. And then finally, after Naomi's presentation, we will be wrapping up with a Q&A session. So as I mentioned previously, please do feel free to type up questions in the question panel on the right-hand side. So we are now ready to start, so I will be handing over to Dominique.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, so I'll just take you through a few thoughts to get us in the right frame of mind and put some context there. So if we could have the first slide. So just for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dominique Thompson and I'm a GP by background. I worked for almost 20 years at the University of Bristol, where for the last 7 years I was head of department. And in that time I introduced quite a lot of new innovative ways of providing services. So we started our own in-house eating disorders psychotherapy service, which then went citywide. We introduced our own in-house service with psychologists leading that for emotionally unstable personality disorder, providing DBT, and a whole host of other things. So that culminated in very nice to win an award last year. And since then, I've now decided to do something a bit different. So I've taken a sideways step and I'm working with universities now to help them develop their mental health services and strategy and things like that. Okay, so just next slide. So let's just put some context to what we're talking about. We will all have noticed the increase in the number of students presenting with mental health problems over the last probably 10 years or so. And what we already knew probably was from the graph on the left that this is the age really at university where most mental health conditions present. So as you can see there, the peak age of main prevalence onset is between about 15 and 29. So we've got the biology, if you like. The biology says that if you're going to develop a mental health problem, it's likely to be before the age of 24. But what we know is that we're seeing many, many more people coming forward. And often people say to me, is that because, for example, they're just talking about it more, there's less stigma? And I think that, you know, there is a bit of that. But actually, I think there's a lot more to it. And I think what we're finding in the research is that something has shifted in the culture, in our society, in Western society, that is meaning that we are getting more problems. So when you combine the fact that this is the age of onset, plus this is the age when they go to university, plus the factors we're going to go through in a minute, it starts to make sense about why we're seeing so many more young people with eating disorders, self-harm, anxiety, depression, etc. Okay, next slide. Okay, so sometimes people say, well, is this just a UK phenomenon? And I think it's fair to say it absolutely isn't. Those are just some examples. There are also examples from other countries like Germany, Ireland, etc. So we are probably seeing a worldwide trend, sorry about the typo, in a rise in mental health problems presenting in this generation, the young, sort of under 25, Generation Z, if you will. And so we start to ask ourselves, what is going on? Why is it like this? You know, people say, well, it wasn't like this in my day, so what's going on? Okay, next slide, please. One of the things we need to just consider is, you know, a lot of people have often considered the fact that being a student would somehow be protective, having an education, being in a sort of institute, learning, would that be protective? And unfortunately, the answer to the question is no. So if we have a look at those columns, we can see that the most recent figures that were available are the purple figures for the students last year, and you can see they have significantly lower life satisfaction or feelings of happiness, and in fact higher anxiety, because they are less likely to have low anxiety than young people of the same age in the population or the general population. That is, the red is their age equivalent peers, or blue is the general population. So we have to think about that quite seriously. Why are students less happy, and why do they feel life is less worthwhile? Okay, next. Well, I think we start to see a pattern of a lot of reasons when you start to look at what is happening in society and culture. And some of you may have heard me say some of these things before. Apologies if you have, but I will just reiterate the key things that have shifted. So if you're going to read one paper, it is a brilliant paper on perfectionism that was published at the end of last year by Curran and Hill, and it is well worth your time. But to summarise, they looked at over 40,000 students from the USA, Canada and the UK over 27 years and saw a significant rise in the amount of perfectionist traits in the student population. So essentially, students are becoming more perfectionist. Well, you might say, does that matter? Well, it does, because this level of perfectionism is extremely undermining to their self-confidence. They are very harshly critical of themselves. They are very unsatisfied with the work they produce, and they will, you know, scrap an entire essay and start again and again and again and never be happy with it. So that is a pressure for them. But actually, the bit about mental health is that perfectionism and traits of perfectionism are, of course, linked to several mental health conditions, such as eating disorders, anxiety, depression, self-harm, obsessive-compulsive disorder. So if you have more perfectionism in a group, you will see more mental health conditions. So you might ask, why are we seeing, you know, where's this perfectionism coming from? Well, some theories are that it is driven by the shift to an increasingly competitive society. So everywhere we look now, we see competition. Everything has become a competition, and this is even the fun stuff. So hence the picture of the cakes. I have nothing against cakes, but I don't think that baking cakes should be a competition any more than every child who takes a photo, it should perhaps be for an exhibition rather than for a competition. So when we think about the competitiveness of society and our young generation, they are immersed in a world where on TV and at school, everything is a competition: singing, dancing, painting, photography, cake baking, all the fun stuff, as well as the stuff more traditionally that was competitive, has become one-on-one, individual competitiveness is called. So that is something that will drive perfectionism. It's driven by these sort of targets, whether it's educational targets, targets to get into college or university. There are loads of things that children are driven by, and targets is one of them. And now the students are setting themselves not just the target of getting a degree, but it has to be a first. And not just a first, they have to get a postgrad degree. And so they are under enormous pressure to succeed. And again, this comes back to the competitiveness of getting into university and the workplace. So it was very different in the past when maybe only 10% of the population went to university, but now that 50% of the population goes to university, there is increasingly competitiveness to get into university, and then of course in the marketplace with all those graduates. So there's no respite. They are completely immersed in this all the time. If we add on top of that some of these other factors, this concept of meritocracy, the American dream, the fact that they are fed from a very early age, the concept that if they work really hard and give it their all and do their very best, they will achieve the things that they want to achieve. Now, we all know from experience that doesn't always happen, but it can be devastating if they've put enormous effort in and they're not getting the results that they think they deserve. So they have to learn to deal with that, but it can be very hard for them. Parents now play a huge role in kids' lives, especially the academic side, in a way that perhaps they didn't a few years ago. So maybe we remember the days of benign neglect, where kids were allowed to, go off and cycle around the streets and meet their friends and kick a ball about. But now it's much more structured. They have clubs, they have activities, and then these helicopter parents are often involved throughout the school, and they expect to be involved with university as well. And so not only do they expect that involvement, but they can put a lot of pressure, especially from some international students. We see that as well. Huge pressure to not let down your parents, that perhaps they've invested not only their time and their energy and their love, but actually financially now as well. So there's a real pressure there. And then there's the 24/7 society. So all of this is going on. But students are never, if you like, off duty. They are being graded and monitored by social media, amongst other ways, all the time. So having to live up to expectations and never able to sort of relax. So all of these things can be combining to impact on their mental health. Next slide, please. The problem is that even though we know a lot more of them are getting problems, having problems, they're not always seeking help. Whether it's studies that show that half of UK students avoid visiting their GP, which came out last year, that was a study of 1,000 students, that they just won't go, to knowing that some of our most unwell students will not or have not sought help before a mental health crisis, or in the worst case scenarios for suicide. And we have to think, what is going on? What are the barriers? And then how do we tackle those? Now, we know that some of the barriers are that they worry about stigma and being discriminated against. We know that they don't always recognise that there's an issue. That is a big problem. They just don't realise when something has gone, if you like, too far and has become a problem rather than just part of the normal ups and downs. They think they can fix it. They think that they'll sort it out. They don't realise that they're going to need help. And they're very worried in some cases about confidentiality. They perhaps are not confident that their details won't be shared with their parents or with their, for example, university, if it's the health service or something like that. So we need to give them these reliable and evidence-based resources with the right information, telling them, right, this is what you need to look out for. If this happens, get help, how to get help. And it needs to be really informative so that they understand it is confidential, etc. So to, really diminish some of those concerns and reduce the barriers to getting help. Next slide, please. So really this leads us to the project, which I'm really pleased to be involved with, because we've heard about the whole university approach from Universities UK. I was on the step change panel that devised the guidance. And the idea was that it is no longer okay for it just to be all put on the doorstep of the student support services. The whole university, and that's staff and student, need to be looked after to be able to be well and stay well. So we need a lot more of, if you like, the upstream preventative approaches to try and avoid some of these mental health crises, to avoid them getting unwell. And if they are going to get unwell, which is, the normal life path for some people, to know when to get help and who to go to and what might happen if they do seek help, just to reassure them. So the idea is to provide an evidence-based, expert-informed programme that will inform and educate the students. It'll allow them to be able to support their friends so they can support each other. They'll know what to look out for in their friends. And it'll give them some lifelong skills, the idea that they know a bit more about not only looking after themselves, but finance, sexual health, things like that. It's not just mental health. And I hope now Naomi is going to tell us a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dominique. I think that was a really interesting presentation. So everyone in the audience, you will be able to ask Dominique any questions that you have at the end. So just before we go into Naomi's presentation, we'd just like to ask you an audience question. So have you noticed an increased number of students on waiting lists for support at your institution? And also, have you had difficulties meeting this demand? Thank you very much, everyone who responded to this poll. So here are the results. So 83% of you said that you have experienced both of these at your institution, which I think is really interesting. And I think this also leads nicely into Naomi's presentation on our new Epigeum toolkit.
Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to talk to you about our new toolkit. Being Well, Living Well is a new toolkit designed to boost student well-being with practical skills and coping strategies to embed positive behaviours. We're currently inviting institutions to join our development group collaboration, which will involve attending a workshop in May 2019 and helping us to shape the content of the programme. The programme will then launch in May 2020. So alongside authors, reviewers and advisors, we collaborate with universities around the world to make sure our programmes are effective and relevant. These collaborations are called development groups. So what does a development group do? Development group members collaborate with the programme's lead advisor, authors, reviewers and Epigeum to shape the programme. This is done by agreeing the detailed course curriculum, participating in the programme launch workshop, as I mentioned, that will be May 2019, peer reviewing the materials as they are worked into the courses, and we'll have a reviewing period in the summer of next year, and also arranging for students and staff in their institutions to potentially appear in the course videos. So input from the development group members ensures that our programmes closely match what universities really need and resulting in high quality, well-rounded resources. In terms of the benefits of joining the development group, you'll get access to the premium interactive content at a speed, quality and level of investment that's unachievable for any single institution. You'll also get a campus-wide unlimited license to the course material in perpetuity with anytime, anywhere access, and significant input into the planning and development of the courses. After it's published, you'll get full technical support and implementation training to assist you in getting started or in customising the content. Previous development group members have said they see this as a positive experience to work with their peers and help to produce outstanding and applicable programmes. So this programme takes a preventative approach, offering the general student population a complete toolkit on wellbeing and therefore enabling student support services to focus their attention on those students requiring additional support. It will support positive mental health and promote healthy behaviours within the student population, helping students to maintain a good quality of life, which is an important factor in student retention and academic success. It will be developed in conjunction with wellbeing, higher education and mental health experts, and the modules encompass the wide range of issues commonly experienced by students, so covering mental, physical, emotional and financial wellbeing. It will provide tools and tips for maintaining a healthy body and mind and will be built using high quality content and sophisticated pedagogy to maximise student engagement. So we'll include interactive comprehension and reflection activities to check understanding of key concepts and focus on building self-awareness. The resource will take a positive and holistic approach to enable students to develop self-awareness and strategies for coping and prevention, while also signposting when and where to seek further support. Crucially, it's designed specifically for university students, so it aims to encourage proactive self-management of difficulties, which we've talked about previously, and Dom mentioned this, reducing that strain on support services so they can focus more attention on students in crisis. So Dom is our lead advisor for the UK version of the programme. She'll be offering her expert advice and playing a key role in helping us to shape the content of the toolkit. The toolkit is aimed at the general student population, providing essential advice and identifying behaviours that support good well-being, as well as identifying when students seek additional help. It will be relevant to undergraduate students all the way from pre-arrival through to graduation. It's also relevant to postgraduate students with pods and scenarios highlighting key information for this group's specific needs. The language and tone will be very important to ensure the modules are not patronising and that students can identify with the information. Resilience will be a theme running through the programme, although again, careful consideration is needed to ensure this comes across in a very positive and supportive way. So learning outcomes. The programme will enable students to recognise common mental health issues and negative academic behaviours and identify effective coping strategies. It'll identify when and where to seek additional support for mental health and wellbeing issues, to develop strategies for supporting peers and understanding the limitations of being a peer supporter, understand the link between physical health and mental wellbeing and recognise the components of a healthy lifestyle, identify practical considerations to ensure personal safety, and to plan finances and budget effectively. So looking at a bit more at the structure of the programme, it's divided into 4 strands and a total of 16 modules. The modules average about 20 minutes each. Some are a little bit longer, a couple are slightly shorter. So in total, there's about 5 hours worth of content. These are not linear courses meant to be studied from start to finish. It's a toolkit made up of distinct bite-sized modules that students can dip in and out of depending on their individual needs. And as the platform was fully enabled for mobile phones, students can access the toolkit anytime, anywhere. We're also planning to include a pre-test to identify which modules students would most benefit from in order to improve their personal well-being. A bit more detail about the programme outline. The Feeling Well strand covers the transition to university, mental health issues such as self-esteem and confidence, stress, anxiety and depression, study pressures, and the focus will be on highlighting the signs and symptoms with guidance on self-management where it's appropriate and signposting for further help. Living Well will look at physical well-being, covering diet, exercise and study life balance and highlighting the links to mental well-being. Staying Safe and Well provides practical, non-judgmental advice to help students make healthy and informed decisions about alcohol, drug use. Further modules address healthy relationships, so including respect, resolving conflicts and dealing with harassment and violence, as well as sexual health issues. And students are then given essential guidance for personal and online safety. Finally, Spending Well takes a pragmatic approach, providing a clear overview of financial management and budgeting strategies. So our programmes are designed with a strong pedagogical approach, integrating a range of presentational and interactive activities to engage the students. The programme will instil in students a sense that they're not alone in experiencing difficulties in their academic or personal lives. So it will provide a normalisation experience through the use of real student voices in the scenarios, case studies and videos. These will also provide an opportunity to represent various student groups. So for example, LGBTQ, care leavers, mature students and international students. Videos and bespoke high-quality animations will be integrated throughout to explore key concepts and themes and to incorporate student opinions. Poll activities are designed to dispel myths, reduce stigma, and to demonstrate a sense that students are not alone in experiencing difficulties in their academic or personal lives. And students are more likely to speak to their friends when they're experiencing difficulties than they are to seek support from university services. So the programme will help students to recognise when their peers may be in need of help, but also to know the limits of their responsibility. And this will be done through the use of peer support pods that provide practical tips. And each module will conclude with an action plan where students can build a list of personalised steps to implement rational thinking and behaviours in their academic and personal lives. There are also opportunities for universities to customise the content, so you can add in your own resources, and our implementation team can also help you to integrate the toolkit as part of a blended learning approach. So the instructor's manual will also include ideas for additional activities that can support the content. The overall benefits of the toolkit, it will help students maintain a good quality of life, contributing to student satisfaction and success. Inspire students to build self-insight and the strength and confidence to overcome problems. Reduce feelings of isolation by incorporating the peer voice into the material. Support positive mental health and promote healthy behaviours within the student population. Encourage proactive self-management of low-level issues, and hopefully support universities in meeting the recommendations of the Universities UK Step Change Framework. So finally, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples, some screenshots from one of our existing programmes, which is Consent Matters. So this is an online course to help students understand sexual health and promote positive change in the university community. It gives clear and practical advice and includes student quotes and perspectives throughout. Here you can see some practice scenarios and activities that ground the content in real life, give specific advice for difficult situations, and show what consent looks like in practice. And there's lots of practical advice as well as reflective quizzes, looking at boundaries and more factual quizzes, and then the final course quiz, which results in a certificate. So lots of interactive features and designed specifically with students in mind and very engaging. In terms of feedback on our Consent Matters course, over 55,000 students have accessed the hosted version of the course since it was published. This doesn't account for the 50% of institutions that use the course on their own VLE. The feedback has been really positive. We've had 88% of students surveyed said they had an overall positive impression of the course, and 83% said the course was effective in improving their understanding. I know universities have run their own surveys and had very similar results as well. So that's it from me. Any questions?
Thank you, Naomi. Yes, so we can now open up the discussion, so we can take any questions from any of our audience members. Please do type these up in the question panel and we'll try and answer as many as we can. So we'll start with this question. So Naomi, this is for you. How will you ensure that this course will be accessible to all students?
Well, I guess there's a couple of elements here. I mean, the course is written for a broad range of students. So the content will be relevant to all students, but as I mentioned before, through the activities, we can introduce experiences and opinions from specific student groups so that all students can find something that's very relevant to them. In terms of accessibility, we also have an accessibility advisor that looks through our programs, and they give us advice on how to make sure that the content is accessible to students with particular disabilities. We have full audio descriptions of some of the activities that happen as well.
Perfect, thank you, Naomi. We've just had another question come through for you as well. So someone has asked, how do you get students to engage with this? Because attendance is already an issue.
Yes, so the aim of the programme is to ensure that all students have access to essential content. the fact that it's really accessible, they can access it on their mobile phones, means that they can dip in and out of the content whenever they need it. Obviously, we'd hope that institutions are promoting it to their students, perhaps in pre-arrival packs and throughout their time at university. But this should be a resource that's available for them to easily access at any point in their university career.
Thanks, Naomi. So then another question we have from the audience. So how can support for mental health be embedded within programs of study rather than be an add-on?
That's really interesting question. I mean, in terms of the program, I think there's opportunities for us to perhaps extend what we're doing in this area. We will be looking at perhaps developing modules in future around staff well-being. I think this links nicely. I know universities are having curriculum advisors that advise specifically on well-being now, and so hopefully this will be kind of the beginning of very much more joined-up approach to well-being.
Perfect, thank you. There's a lot of questions for you here. So is this aimed at just higher education institution students?
The issues in the course, addressed in the course, would actually be relevant to a very wide range of students. So actually it could be relevant to college students as well. That the primary focus will be around higher education students. That's the groups that we anticipate working with in terms of the development group, but we do welcome others too.
Perfect, thanks. So another question, which I think I can answer. So someone has asked, is there a key person to contact regarding joining this project? And if so, is there a fee? So after this Q&A session, I will display our contact details. So please do contact us and we can give you more information on the pricing and the timescales for the project as well. So there will be a fee, and it's hard to say what it will be because it will depend on the size of the university and the number of students that will be accessing it. So another question is, how is the program impact measured with those who take part in modules? Is there an evaluation toolkit being developed or linked to a research study to measure impact?
So what we're hoping to do with the program is for hopefully the modules, or certainly at the strand levels, will be to introduce some pre and post tests that will help measure student engagement and what they've got out of that module. It is possible for institutions to actually set this as a prerequisite for students. So if you wanted to do that, then you are able to track very easily who's actually participated as well.
Thank you. Another question, is the course and its content culturally and ethnically sensitive? I am thinking specifically about the attention given to diversity of representation in the content and in the content and issues that disproportionately impact students of colour.
Yes, so there are going to be a lot of different issues affecting different groups of students and different cultural backgrounds that affects students' thinking on particular issues. So as I mentioned before, the aim would be that through different activities and opinions, we would have scenarios and case studies that reflect different student groups and different student experiences, and that would enable us to kind of represent that quite diverse nature of the student population.
Thank you. Another question, are there plans to develop modules that focus on specific mental health/emotional issues? For example, managing anxiety, coping with low mood, etc.
Yes, absolutely. So that will be in the initial strand, feeling well. So we have modules on, there's one on self-esteem, confidence and resilience. There's one on stress, anxiety and depression. There'll be a brief module covering self-harm and suicidal thoughts.
Perfect, thank you. Then another question, is there a fee for becoming involved in the development group that will work on the toolkit? That is not clear from what you have said. I'm really sorry. Yes, there will be a fee for taking part in the development group as well. Another question, when students are engaging with the modules, are their interactions moderated in any way?
No. So this is an opportunity for students to use the activities in ways that would benefit them most. So, for example, the action plans at the end, that would be something that students can put together, and then they can take that away afterwards and use it and work on it and change it as they need to. But they're not moderated specifically.
Thank you. So can links be included in the modules to other tools that we are already using? For example, a link to Black Bullion in the finance modules.
Yes, absolutely. So you can add resources around the programme, around the modules, and that's absolutely no problem at all. It might be done in slightly different ways depending on whether you're using it on your VLE or whether you're using our hosted platform, but we can certainly talk to you about the different ways that you can integrate your own resources.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, another question. With international students, there are cultural and language barriers. How does this program cover this, and how does it meet this need?
In terms of language, I think we will have to be very careful, and I think this applies to the broad student population as well, to ensure that the content is accessible and understandable and is not patronising. In terms of cultural differences, yes, this is something that at times we may have to specifically point out within the modules, and at other times it might be something that just comes through in the case studies and scenarios about different approaches and a different experience of particular students.
Thank you. So we have a number of mature students who come to university with a variety of ongoing concerns that may not be the same as for a younger student cohort. Will this course be useful for them?
Yes, I mean that there will be some areas of the programme that's not as useful. For example, the transition to university, the kind of first module, that might not be as relevant to those mature students, but much of the programme will be very, very relevant, and that's why we've designed it in this toolkit approach so that students can dip in and out of the material that's really relevant to them. And as I said, we can kind of highlight particular groups' needs through the different activities and the pedagogical structure.
So now we have a question for Dominique. So does Dominique have any tips for how academics can support students' mental health?
Yes, so I think that's a really important point, that often they are the first point of contact, or maybe the first one to notice that something, is amiss, or that the person's not coming as regularly. I think there is something about, just on a practical terms, to do with this programme. It would be helpful, for example, if universities were happy for academics and personal tutors to recommend this programme as somewhere that's reliable and evidence-based for students to go and consider, learning a bit more about it. So I think they can be involved in the signposting. On a day-to-day level, it's really important for academics to understand enough about mental health through perhaps training courses and updates to recognise when there is a problem and signpost appropriately. But I think it's also really important that they protect themselves and look after themselves and maintain boundaries and not get over involved. One of the things, for example, a little useful tip is to perhaps consider having an out of office email, so that you're not worrying that an email will come in overnight and you won't be there, or if you spot it at midnight that you're worrying about the students who are in crisis. If you have an out of office message that you put on every evening or weekends that says, this email is not monitored between these hours. If you are in mental health crisis or need immediate support, please contact, and then give the number of Samaritans or whatever your local out of hours support is. And I just think, you know, little things like that, they give you a boundary, they give you support, they're useful and practical and safe, because we are seeing more and more academics having to manage these issues and being presented with these issues, but needing to signpost on to the experts.
Thank you, Dominique. That's really great. Another question that has just come through. Do you have any concerns about the use of the word modules when engaging with the students, or is this not used on the student interface? Bearing in mind that they already study modules, so it might sound a bit more like work.
No, absolutely. That's very much kind of the terminology we've currently been using just as we're developing the programme outline, but it won't be used in terms of the student experience of the toolkit.
Thanks, Naomi. Another question, how will you reassure students that all the information they submit is confidential and that it won't be passed on to their department or the central wellbeing teams?
Yeah, I mean, we will make that very clear in the introduction, in the welcome kind of screens of the toolkit as students go into it. Yeah, I think I agree, that's very important.
Perfect. Thank you, Naomi, and thanks, Dominique, as well. I think that was all the questions that we have had. And thank you so much to everyone who asked questions. I think that was really interesting and it's good to hear your thoughts. So now I think we can wrap it up. So just on my screen now, you can see our contact details. Some of you may have already been in touch with us regarding this collaboration, but we can give you a lot more detail, as I said, in regards to pricing as well as the timescales for this collaboration. So please do contact us if you have any questions. If you had a question that didn't get answered, or you know, please contact us. We will also be able to provide you with a trial of any of our other courses if you'd like to just get a feel for how the courses look and function. And also, this is just a reminder that we will be recording this presentation and you can watch it again and share this with any colleagues that you think might find it of interest. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending this webinar today. I hope you all have a good rest of the day and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.